Welcome back, everybody, to another episode on the channel. Thank you guys for tuning in today. As you guys can see, we're out on the water. I actually just got done fishing, and I figured, you know what? I've been dealing with a lot of muddy water lately, and I would love to do a video on just how to fish muddy water. What's kind of happening when you're getting all that muddy water, and where to look for fish, because I don't care what lake you're on, what river system you're on. When you get muddy water, when there's been a lot of rain and it's super muddy, it can make fishing really tough. It's not ideal conditions, and muddy water fishing generally is tough fishing. Generally, it's just hard to get those few bites, and if you're tournament angling or you're just out there for fun, you need to kind of pay attention to what you're doing and use the right lures, baits, and target the right areas where you're going to actually be able to get those bites you need. So if you're fishing a tournament, I mean, you're fishing for 5 bites. And, you know, if you're just out there fishing for fun and you're trying to catch fish, you still want to be able to target those right areas and use the right baits. So in today's episode, that's what we're going to be covering. Really quick before we jump into today's episode is sponsored by, once again, guys, Super K Jigs. If you guys have never heard of Super K Jigs, they are a long-time supporter of the channel and big-time supporter, and they make a lot of different jigs. They make swim jigs, flipping jigs. They make, I mean, just about anything you can imagine. They make this one bait called the Klaken. It's a bladed jig as well. They make terminal tackle. Now, what sets Super K apart from all these other brands, guys, is Super K is hand-tied. All of their baits and lures are hand-tied lures, so their jigs, they hold up. That's really something that I really love about their stuff, and it's just something that I stand behind, because I throw swim jigs and jigs religiously on this channel, guys, and I absolutely hate having jigs that do not have hand-tied skirts. If you have a jig that doesn't have a hand-tied skirt, I can promise you right now it is not going to hold up. After so many catches with that fish, that skirt is going to be so torn up and so pulled apart that you're going to have to switch out jigs. So in my opinion, guys, Super K Jigs makes some of the best jigs I have ever fished with. I absolutely love them. They have every color you can imagine. I'll link their website down below in the description, so if you guys want to check them out. But they have every single color you could imagine. If there's a color that they don't have, you can email them and they'll be more than happy to work with you guys and get you the colors that you need. But I can imagine there's probably some colors on there that you guys will like. But for me, guys, I absolutely love Super K, so they're a big supporter of the channel. So I will link Super K down below in the description. Also, if you guys use the code WW20, it'll get you guys 20% off your order. So if you're looking to spend some money on some jigs, head over to Super K, click that link down below, it'll take you over there, pick out some jigs, and then use that code WW20, and that code will get you 20% off of your order. Guys, so now let's get into the meat and potatoes of the video. Today we're talking about muddy water. So, you know, when you're fishing muddy water, generally you're fishing kind of rising water, you know, with muddy water. Generally, what happens is you have a bunch of rain. Recently, like we have here in Wisconsin where I'm at, we've had a bunch of rainstorms push through. And when those rainstorms kind of push through, they just make the water super dirty, super muddy. And generally, you're dealing with rising water. So what does that mean with the fish? Well, here's what the fish are gonna do. When you have rising water, especially when it's muddy, whenever you start to get muddy, stained, dirty water, fish will relate to structure. So what I mean by that is they'll pull up next to logs, they'll get right tight to the bank because they want to feel safe. They'll have their back against the log, or they'll have their nose right tight to the bank, things like that. They want to feel secure and safe. So when you have super muddy water, they can't really see. So what they do is they push tight to structure, docks, things like that. They'll start to get very shallow. Sometimes even in a foot of water. Sometimes you can even see their backs in the water in certain spots. But that's what the fish will do. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the rising water thing. When you're starting to get all that rain, you're starting to get muddy water, it's starting to rise. So those fish are gonna follow the water shallow, and they're gonna hide right up tight to the bank, right tight to structure, because that water's muddy and it's rising. So when it's rising, you kind of got to follow those fish up. So now when it comes to targeting these areas, the areas you're really looking for when you're fishing muddy water is, like I said, you know, down trees, logs, timbers, or timber, you know, you're looking for, you know, shallow banks that have cover on them, you know, down trees, docks, things like that. Most of the time, you can find them pretty shallow on banks. So if you're going to a place where you've caught them before really well when it's not muddy, and then all of a sudden it's muddy, but you kind of know where those fish were before, follow them shallow. I promise you they'll be up shallow or tight to cover. So look very shallow. We just had really muddy water. I mean, the water's still kind of dirty where I'm at, but an instance would be, I knew that these fish would be pushed up into this one pocket that I went into last weekend, and sure enough, I was paralleling the bank with a spinnerbait, and I literally seen the wake of that fish just jet right off of the bank and smash that spinnerbait. So that just goes to show you, they're gonna be tight on those banks shallow. So now let's talk about your options here. So you really have two options when it comes to fishing muddy water. Now, you can either kind of take the power fishing approach, and you're going to be using, you know, power fishing lures, or you can slow down and kind of flip. It's really going to depend on what you want to do as an angler. Me, I'm more of a power fisherman, so I'll take that power fishing approach first, and then if I'm really not getting bit and I really feel like I just need to switch it up, that's when I'll start slowing down. So if you're going to take the power fishing approach, which is what I do the majority of the time, you're going to be needing to go with, you know, baits that are going to pop out. So now when it comes to fishing like a power fishing style with muddy water conditions, I'll switch over to like a bladed jig, and I'll use like white and chartreuse. I'll use like bright colors when it comes to like fishing, like, you know, that power fishing method. So a bladed jig is a great option, that white and chartreuse or white. I'll also even switch over and fish one of my spinner baits. I have a lot of white and chartreuse spinner baits that I'll throw. I like to throw, actually, I really like the double willow blade when it comes to spinner baits, but you know, if this is all you got is this, you know, willow blade with a Colorado blade, that'll do just fine. Just for me personally, I find that the willow blade tends to do a little better. Now, I'll team these both up, both the spinnerbait and the bladed jig here. I will both team up with a paddle tail on the back. I'll usually use like a Rage Swimmer paddle tail, and that's gonna help give off a bunch more vibration in the water with these baits. So another option that I didn't mention with the bladed jig and the spinnerbait is also going to be a swim jig. Now, once again, I'll still go with that white and chartreuse color like this swim jig right here, and I'll still throw on the paddle tail. Also, I'll even go to like a black and blue, depending. If it's really muddy and I really feel like I need to silhouette better, I'll switch up the swim jig to a black and blue. But white and chartreuse I like to use for my spinner baits and bladed jigs, but swim jigs, that's when I start to get a little more picky about the color. I like to use white and chartreuse in that dirty water, then switch it over to black and blue. Black and blue just does really well in dark water. Once again though, I'll go with that paddle tail Rage Swimmer on the back. And the swim jig's really, really nice when you're trying to get, you know, those fish are gonna be shallow, tight to cover, like I said before. So the swim jig, especially if you got a little bit of grass, you know, the water's gonna be muddy, but there's still gonna be vegetation. This is where the swim jig kind of excels over the bladed jig and the spinnerbait, is it can get through grass a little better, and things like that. So any one of these lures, the swim jig, the spinnerbait, the bladed jig, those are usually my go-to muddy water baits. Any one of those lures, guys, I'm going to be throwing shallow. I mean, I'm going to be paralleling the bank. I'm going to be whipping that thing up as close to the bank as I can, because like I said before, those fish are going to follow that rising water up and they're going to sit shallow. So I will throw this thing super shallow. The swim jig especially, I'll throw into thick cover. I don't really care. I will get shallow, and that's the thing about it, is every single one of those baits I will throw shallow. If I'm up on docks, I'm going to whip it real shallow on the dock or right up next to a pylon, something like that. So whenever you're taking the power fishing approach, you're still going to be fishing shallow with a lot of these baits. Now, your other option is slowing it down. Now, really, you really only have so many options when it comes to flipping and pitching and things like that. And that's, you know, doing a Texas rig. You can Texas rig, or you can do, you know, kind of one of my favorites, and that is just a black and blue jig. Go black and blue. Whenever I'm slowing it down and flipping cover, I like to go with really dark colors. And the majority of the time, it's gonna be that black and blue, black and purple style deal. So whether I'm fishing a Texas rig, where you know, it's your option if you want to peg or unpeg the weight when you fish a Texas rig, but if I'm going to fish a worm off that Texas rig, or any bait that I'm fishing off of that Texas rig, is going to be black and blue or black and purple, something dark. Now, like I said before, a 1/2 ounce flipping jig is my favorite to go with. It just gets down there quick. You can go lighter. I always say, depending on the current and the wind and kind of your weather for that day, go as light as you can. For me, a 1/2 ounce on the Mississippi is usually what does it, so I'll go with like a 1/2 ounce jig. Now, sometimes I will switch to like a white flipping jig, but not very often. In muddy water conditions, I'm gonna go with, you know, that black and blue flipping jig. There's a, you know, I have a bunch of different styles. This one is not really my favorite. This one right here is called the Kaplunk from Super K. This one is got a really nice head on it. I really like this specific jig right here for flipping, especially, I don't know, the head on this is a little, it's a great flipping jig, but it's not like your standard head. I don't know, it does well, it pulls through cover really nice, and it just holds up. I like to pair it, like I said, with a black and blue like Rage Craw on the back of there, but that is really your only options when it comes to slowing it down. You could go to a Ned rig, but you kind of want a bigger presentation, so they're seeing that silhouette in the water. Again, when you're tossing, flipping, and pitching, where you're gonna throw a jig or a Texas rig, you're gonna throw it tight to cover. Once again, find those big, you know, down trees, find those docks, find those, you know, anything with good cover. You're gonna be throwing this right up in there as tight as you can. I can't emphasize that enough. If there's a little pocket in there where it's right tight to cover, pitch in there, because that's where the fish is going to be. You know, you could cast all over a certain log, and unless you hit that certain spot where that fish is sitting and put it right on them, especially in muddy water, they're not going to hit it. So muddy water, you pretty much got to drop it right in on them. So if you guys are going to be flipping, pitching, anything, go with the black and blue color and get that sucker tight to cover. There you guys have it. That is kind of my secrets and stuff to fishing muddy water. It's not really any secrets, guys. It's just some tips to help you with fishing muddy water. Now, fishing muddy water, like I said, those conditions are going to be tough anyway, so don't expect to just absolutely slay them. I'm sure there's some occasions where people have, but expect the fishing to be tougher. But those tips should help you guys put some fish in the boat. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you guys have a lure or bait that I did not mention that you think is good for muddy water, throw it down in the comments below. Share that knowledge around. Otherwise, if you guys have any questions or anything, leave it down in the comments below. I will answer you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in for today's episode, and we'll see you guys on the next one.